What's up, fellers? It's Stellar, and it's time to talk about Pokemon Legends ZA. Yeah, that's right, we finally got a release date for this game. I'm not sure why it took so long for this to happen, but the date is October 16th, 2025. Perfect, because it actually lines up very close with Pokemon X and Y's release date of October 12th, 2013. Of course, we're a couple days after the fact, but hey, you know what? That's a pretty interesting way for it to release. Now, it took a long time for us to finally see a release date. I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm guessing probably because, well, Nintendo Game Freak Pokemon wanted to make sure this game had a certain standard with it. They didn't want to just throw out a release date and say, okay, here we go. But it certainly made things like the Pokemon Presents in February feel quite barren, because we did get to see gameplay of it, but we didn't get to see a release date. That was certainly strange. And then they showed it again in the Nintendo Direct, which kind of made me think, well, what was even the point of the Pokemon Presents besides being a mobile game dump for people? And I'm sorry if you like those mobile games, but I guess we'll talk a little bit more about those later on. But when it comes to Legends ZA, yeah, it's going to be really freaking cool, to say the least, since, well, Pokemon X and Y didn't get a third version, didn't get DLC, like all the other versions that we've seen for Pokemon. So it's certainly important for us to see ZA. This is why it's such a big deal, because X and Y definitely got the short end of the stick. So it's awesome to see we're finally got a release date. Now, there will also be a Nintendo Switch 2 upgrade version that you can upgrade from the original version, or just simply buy the Nintendo Switch 2 version separately if you don't want to deal with the upgrade stuff. But I could see people getting the original Switch version, maybe because they, it's easier to just use between the Switch and Switch 2, rather than just getting the Switch 2 cartridge and using it, not being able to use it on the original Switch. But I don't know, that's a whole can of worms we're not going to open up there. But getting back to the release date, I just thought it was really strange how we didn't see one. Same thing we haven't seen with Metroid Prime 4, but that's not necessarily Pokemon, just more so just Nintendo in general. So I don't really know what's going on too much with these release dates. I don't really care for shadow drops. I like things to be planned in advance. So it is nice to see that we have a release date, not within like a month before it's coming out, but we're a season ahead of things once that releases in the fall later on. Now, another interesting thing as well is there's going to be a Pokemon Presents July 22nd of this year, a little after Donkey Kong Bonanza's release. Now, what exactly is going to be in this Pokemon Presents? Well, anything could happen, but I will say, since it's been a pretty bad track record the last couple of years, the Pokemon Presents have completely sucked. Yeah, I know, I hate saying that. And a lot of people are like, well, of course they're going to suck. It's Pokemon or something. I'm just like, well, there's a certain standard for, the IP, the greatest IP in the world, where it should have something more than just simply like mobile games, the stuff we already know about, updates, things that you just can simply be posted on Twitter. Why just take the time out of your day to just rally around, gather around, YouTube, what are smartphones, devices, whatever it may be, and realize, oh, wow, that wasn't great. I just wasted my time. Yeah, so actually the last Pokemon Presents, I didn't actually, see it. Life's been getting pretty busy for me, and I didn't actually take the time to go out on way, because I'm like, well, the last few have sucked, so, and really, I didn't miss anything. I knew there was going to be Legends ZA footage. It was kind of the obvious thing, and that's kind of sad when it's really easy to predict what's going to happen in there, that, yeah, there really wasn't a whole lot. I think the last Pokemon Presents that actually, had me, in a wow factor probably was in 2020, when they announced the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon remakes of the original game, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX. Now, I think that really a lot of people would just like to see more spin-off material in general from Pokemon. And I think the biggest thing, if I was to predict what's going to happen, talking about the Pokemon Presents in July 22nd, is, well, definitely spin-off stuff on the Nintendo Switch Online, or since Nintendo's renaming it to Nintendo Classics, we could see all sorts of different things. And a lot of people would like to see, of course, the main series Pokemon games on the Game Boy, on the Game Boy Advance. Of course, those were delisted through the 3DS eShop way back when, red, blue, yellow, gold, silver, crystal, all those games. That'd make a whole lot of sense to put them on the Game Boy Online. Now, as for if it would be an upcharge, who really knows? And Pokemon's definitely taking their time when it comes to that. We have at least seen spin-off games on the Game Boy Online, because a lot of people are thinking, well, these are main series Pokemon games. They're going up in price. Nintendo wants to cash in on the fact that the third-party market is, well, making a lot of money off of these old Pokemon games. And I will say that is quite ridiculous. It doesn't really help that those were delisted of the 3DS eShop, but Nintendo has shown that there's reasons why they've delisted a lot of their games on the 3DS, on the Wii U, because, well, those eShops aren't exactly accessible on their current platforms, being the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2, so they want to make things in a more formulated, updated, modern format space. So I'm sure we'll be seeing the Pokemon games on the Game Boy Online eventually. It only makes sense. And the big deal as well being that this would be the first time that the Game Boy Advance Pokemon games would be re-released. Of course, being Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. Those are especially hard to come by games, very hard to get on the third-party market. Yeah, I know you can go out there and just do things I'm not going to talk about on here, because a lot of people are like, why don't you just go out there and, you know, get an emulator or something? And I'm just like, well, a lot of people would like to check these out, you know, first-party wise. They don't really want to, you know, go through the hassle of doing that. They'd rather do things through mainline stuff. And I totally understand that. You know, I respect whatever people do, but I myself, we're just going to be talking about the official methods. And of course, because there is online support, which is exactly why they called this application Nintendo Switch Online for, you know, most of their life. Now they're calling them Nintendo Classics. Well, that's going to be a pretty big deal since the Game Boy versions didn't have online support for trading and battling. Excuse me, on the 3DS Virtual Console, not the Game Boy versions. Well, I mean, yeah, technically they didn't. I mean, yeah, there was the Game Boy adapter for Pokemon Crystal and stuff like that, but that was very limited. It was Japan only. You know, all that fun stuff. So certainly am looking forward to that. Now, it would be nice if there was also some sort of connectivity between Pokemon Home. I think that's why it's taking so long for us to see the main series games on the Game Boy Online, or really just on Nintendo Switch in general. And really, those games could even be released entirely separate, some people have said, but we won't know until, of course, Pokemon does something. I think that in July, that could certainly be like what we could be seeing, main series Pokemon games re-released from Generations 1, 2, and 3. Since, well, a lot of people are going to be upset once with the inevitable closure of Pokemon Bank. It's still open, by the way. Pokemon Bank is still open. Pokemon Transporter still opens. But once that closes, it's going to be pretty sad because, well, yeah, Generation 3 is going to be cut off, 1 and 2 technically as well, because you can still use your 3DS Virtual Console version. But let's move on to spin-offs now. I think if we wouldn't see some sort of, well, Pokemon game released through the you know, Virtual Console, the main series stuff, excuse me, Nintendo Classics. I hate these naming schemes. We'll probably see some sort of spin-off game. Now, we do know that we have Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness coming to the GameCube Classics for Nintendo Switch 2. Very, very, very prominent titles, since these have not only been not re-released before, but, well, GameCube is extremely sought after just in general. And these are Pokemon games that a lot of people haven't experienced, maybe because, well, it was on a home console. They're a little bit more expensive, and they sold less since they're on a console that sold less in general compared to the Game Boy Advance. Now, it would be interesting if these could have connectivity with the Game Boy Advance games if they did release eventually through some sort of method on the Nintendo Switch, or excuse me, Nintendo Switch 2, since that wouldn't make a lot of sense to release them on the Switch, but not the Switch 2. But I guess we won't really see too much. Now, as for which one of these will come out first, it would make the most sense for Coliseum to release, because technically XD is a sequel to Coliseum. But it is interesting because in the GameCube lineup, they showed XD first and then Coliseum later. But I don't know, I wouldn't pay too much attention to that GameCube lineup from things going left to right. There are other GameCube games on, you know, Pokemon related, such as Pokemon Channel, which has Pokemon Mini. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like a Pokemon Game & Watch of sorts, or a Tamagotchi. But that was really cool because it had, you know, those Pokemon mini games in there, or just Pokemon, not mini games, Pokemon mini space games, not mini games combined in there. That was a really cool piece of Pokemon history, since, well, that was like the only time when Nintendo has actually, or Pokemon Company, Game Freak, whatever it may be, re-released those, since they're a very obscure piece of hardware and they're pretty hard to come by, especially, you know, price-wise too. Now, we could also see other Pokemon games released on hardware that we already have, such as like the Game Boy Online. Pokemon Pinball is a pretty big deal because that series is, you know, since we now have finally a new entry of Snap, Pokemon Pinball is the one that people have been clamoring about for a while, and it's never had a re-release, surprisingly, even on the 3DS Virtual Console. Maybe because it had Rumble support and the 3DS didn't have that. Now that we have seen things with the Nintendo Switch, you know, of course, having Rumble support built in, we could see Rumble support happening for Pokemon Pinball on the Game Boy, and even Game Boy Advance, since that was even supported if you had a Game Boy player with the GameCube controller. I think Pokemon Pinball is a fantastic, phenomenal series. I mean, it would be pretty cool if we saw Pokemon Pinball released through Game Boy Advance, Nintendo Classics, since it's, well, it's been pretty prominent, Ruby and Sapphire version in the media and YouTube recently, since there's been a lot of discoveries made. That would be really freaking cool, just to say the least. I mean, there's a lot of potential for spin-off games that have not been put on, the Nintendo Virtual Console. I once again am mixing up that name because I just hate that scheme. There is also Pokemon Puzzle League. I think it's like Battle League or something on the Game Boy Color. I'm not too familiar with that one, but from what I understand, it's essentially a port of the N64 one. Out of all the Pokemon games I've played, I just haven't played that one because, for one, I'm not much of a puzzle fan, but I do understand people are out there that like Tetris Attack and stuff like that, games that are similar at least to Tetris Attack, so that is something that I'm just surprised we haven't seen through Game Boy Color. I at least know of its existence. I probably should have picked it up when it was on the 3DS Virtual Console. I do remember there was like a sale. Could have got it for 30% off at one point, but I passed it up because, well, I'm sorry, that Pokemon naming isn't going to get me to buy a spin-off game, a puzzle spin-off game that I'm just not huge on. But speaking of spin-off games that I'm a little more interested in, being Pokemon Picross. I'm not sure why I never downloaded this one for the 3DS, which that one was unfortunately delisted, but Pokemon Picross, honestly, it makes a whole lot of sense since Pokemon just loves these freaking like mobile game kind of style things. So why haven't we seen that yet? We've seen Jupiter Corporation. We just were talking about Pokemon Pinball. They made those games. And there was an unreleased Pokemon Picross for the Game Boy. That would be really cool if we saw that happen. Sure, there was an English version, but the game was essentially completed. So it was really strange not to see this happen. So, I don't know, Pokemon, we'd love to see some sort of surprise out of them, whether it be some sort of main series games or just really some sort of, surprise spin-off on unreleased games such as Pokemon Picross. Even a new entry of Pokemon Picross would be cool in general, but I guess the last thing, because I've been jumping around all over the place before I forget something I did see interestingly, is there's Pokemon plushies for Mega Pokemon. And what's interesting is I'm pretty sure there has been, maybe not of all these Pokemon released of Mega versions. I'm personally looking forward to Mega Mawile, but there's a Mega Lucario plush that I do remember seeing at a Toys R Us. I don't think it's as high a quality as the one that's going to be released from Pokemon, but then again, I don't know. Some of the stuff I got from PokemonCenter.com has been a little shoddy, but yeah, there's going to be Pokemon Mega plushes because, of course, Mega Pokemon are back. I don't think we're going to be necessarily seeing any new Mega Pokemon. I have seen some of the leaks, but don't talk about those in the comment section, please. I'm not exactly sure if they're true or not, but at the same time, even if they are true, we don't want to spoil people because, well, it's just about a courteous thing in general. With that being said, then, what do you think about all this, just random information dropped about Pokemon Legends ZA, just Pokemon stuff in general? Good to see a release date. Good to see we're going to be getting more information about Pokemon because, well, they've been kind of sleeping for a little bit. It certainly is a little strange to say the least. We're not seeing a main series entry this year. I'm guessing they're going to be skipping this year, not just to focus on Legends ZA, but to try to focus more on getting Pokemon Gen 10 as good as possible. I don't even know if we'd see it released next year since this is new hardware. They want to make it as nice as possible. I'm sure they're listening to the criticisms. We're also seeing updates for Scarlet and Violet, so I think maybe I'll finally go back and actually check those games out since they're going to be better. They're not going to be as rough. So, with that being said, then, let me know what you think down below. Are we going to see something cool about Pokemon? I'm not even sure at this point. I'm just rambling. So, yeah, bye-bye, everyone. Take care. I'll see you. Have a good time zone. See ya.